And this is why the issue of climate geoengineering, in terms of radiative forcing geoengineering and carbon dioxide removal, will both continue to be important, and they'll be important to talk about them rather than let this go on without it being talked about openly and clearly. And of course, important to do research so that we have a fundamental understanding of both topics.
So we're here at COP30 in Belém in Brazil. If you hear any unwanted background noise, there's a huge thunderstorm going on at the moment. It's quite dramatic, but that's been the case every day here. And I'm here with Mark Lawrence, who is at the Research Institute for Sustainability in Potsdam. Well, we first met perhaps 15 years ago. Back then you were quite interested in the climate engineering area, and you hosted a couple of conferences in Berlin. And I went to a couple of those and joined them immensely. Dare I say, the meeting in 2014 was directly responsible for our hosting in the following year in Cambridge, our SRM science meeting, and really out of that has come our Centre for Climate Repair, which is running up and running very strong in Cambridge. But how did you get into the climate engineering stuff in the first place?
Oh gosh, well, climate engineering actually goes way back for me to the late 90s.
Wow.
When the first time that I heard about ocean fertilization.
Right.
And the first time I read something about it, I went through the roof on it, because I said, goodness gracious, these people are completely neglecting the connections between plankton and the rest of the atmosphere, not only taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, but all the other side effects. So I published a paper in 2002 in Science about the side effects of ocean fertilization on the atmosphere that built on a paper that a marine biologist had published about the side effects in the oceans. And then that led me through, over the years, to supporting an analysis of what's called the London Convention and London Protocol. That's the law of the sea around dumping. And they, based on that analysis, developed a resolution that this shouldn't be used for commercial purposes, only for research purposes. From there, in that time frame, was when Paul Crutzen, who was my thesis advisor, wrote his famous paper, which in this interview series I probably don't even need to introduce in any way.
But that was the beginning of atmospheric aerosol geoengineering.
Well, not of geoengineering, of the opening of the research around it. So there have been research on it, and there have been discussions on it for 20 years before that. Actually, going back even further than that, but serious discussions and some research up to that point. But Paul Crutzen, as a Nobel laureate with a strong environmental protectionist background, talking about this topic opened up and legitimized that many others quote. And so from that, I decided that's one of the topics I would take when I went to build up this new Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies. And we looked at this, doing many things like bringing together various communities to understand how they see this topic. Like we ran the first workshop on religions and spiritual perspectives. But then we put together these big workshops, and it's so pleasing for me to hear that they have had also a very positive influence on others by bringing together these first international workshops around climate geoengineering.
But I mean, there is a move within the COPs and within the IPCC to bring SRM into the conversations. I mean, it probably needs to be at the COP, I mean, formally, or yes or no? What do you think, having SRM in the proper mediations, the proper meeting rooms?
I think if it is set up right, facilitated well, and brought in from the perspective of this is one of the options that is on the table and being discussed, and not from the perspective of, oh goodness, we're failing with our negotiations, or better yet, hey, why are we even bothering when we have all these fossil fuel lobbyists around? Let's push it forward. Then yes, and that's why we still support strongly research on the topic to understand it, but it needs to be set up in that way, because otherwise it risks derailing in a number of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're familiar with John Shepard's napkin diagram, where in 2010, he was saying, look, emissions reduction, absolutely. Carbon dioxide removal, absolutely. But we're left with this overshoot. How do we deal with that? So SRM looks like perhaps the only way to deal with that. So, but you're right, we can't be seen at all to be shrinking back from the imperative to get off fossil fuels and to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. But, just the talking about it, SRM, maybe does weaken that imperative.
I would not ascribe to saying it's the only way to deal with this issue.
No,
I mean, we have the way actually at our hands. We have the technology and the capacity for renewable energies. We know we can do this.
We've got to do
it's
it.
the question of, that's the question of where's the will?
Yeah.
What are people willing to do? And there's a substantial counter, a substantial counter attitude towards injections of particles in the atmosphere. Is there a will to actually get past that? When you say it's the only thing that we can do, we can actually implement fossil fuels very quickly. We can restructure our agricultural, we can change the behaviors and so on. So those things are all possible.
Do you think COP30 is going to be moving in a meaningful way towards meeting those objectives? Do you sense that that's happening?
Yes and no. So, yes, it moves in a meaningful way, and yes, it moves in a meaningful direction. And there are some new developments in terms of initiatives towards scaling out or phasing out of fossil fuels even more quickly than people had believed would be possible. And it looks like that actually is going to come out from the negotiations here. From the last that I've heard of the developments today, that's very positive, but it's not nearly fast enough.
Right.
And this is why the issue of climate geoengineering, in terms of radiative forcing geoengineering and carbon dioxide removal, will both continue to be important, and they'll be important to talk about them rather than let this go on without it being talked about openly and clearly. And of course, important to do research so that we have a fundamental understanding of both topics.